"People like you don't belong in a family like ours," he said, loud enough for every one of the 3,000 wedding guests to hear. "I'm going to tell you exactly what happened, without softening it, because that's the only way this story makes sense. My name is Evelyn Ross, and at my daughter's wedding, I was publicly humiliated by her father-in-law, not by accident, not in a moment of poor taste, but with planning, pleasure, and cruelty. Preston Montgomery didn't just insult me. He performed my humiliation. The ballroom was enormous glass walls, white orchids, a marble floor polished to a mirror shine. I had never been in a room like that before. I grew up in a mining town where celebrations happened in church basements and VFW halls, where people brought casseroles instead of champagne. I knew I didn't belong to Preston's world, but I belonged to my daughter. That should have been enough. When Preston raised his glass, his smile was thin and sharp, the kind men wear when they enjoy holding power over someone smaller. His eyes found me immediately, like a predator locating prey. "Some people," he continued, pausing as polite laughter rippled through the room, "are born into refinement. Others try to dress it up." His gaze swept over me, my dress, my shoes, my posture. But no amount of effort can hide where you come from. A few people laughed, not loudly, nervously, as if cruelty were a social test they didn't want to fail. I felt my face burn, but I stood still. Savannah sat at the head table, her spine rigid, her hands clenched in her lap. She didn't look at me. That hurt more than his words ever could. After the toast, Preston stepped down from the stage and moved through the crowd, shaking hands like a king collecting tribute. When he reached me, he leaned in too close. I could smell expensive cologne and red wine on his breath. He laughed under his breath and said, "You clean up well for someone like you." As he spoke, he spat. Not accidentally. A fine spray landed on my cheek. He didn't wipe it away. He didn't apologize. He just smiled, slow and satisfied, daring me to react. I didn't. That seemed to amuse him even more. "Oh," he said loudly, turning to the guests nearby. "I almost forgot. We have a little gift for the bride's mother." A small gesture. Charity is important. In Entourage, a server appeared with a neatly wrapped box, silver paper, white ribbon. People leaned in, curious. Preston gestured grandly. "Go on," he said. "Open it." My hands were shaking, but I refused to give him the satisfaction of hesitation. I untied the ribbon and lifted the lid. Inside was a live cockroach. Big, black, its legs scrambling against the velvet lining. I screamed before I could stop myself. My body reacted faster than my pride. I stumbled backward, my heel catching on the edge of the stone basin behind me. The fountain. Cold water swallowed me as I fell. The sound echoed through the ballroom, splashing, gasps, then laughter, real laughter. Not nervous this time. Someone clapped. My dress soaked through instantly, heavy and clinging. My hair came loose. I could taste chlorine and humiliation in my mouth. The cockroach skittered free, lost in the chaos, but it didn't matter. The damage was done. I pushed myself up, water dripping from my sleeves, my shoes ruined, my hands shaking so badly I had to clench them into fists. Preston was laughing openly now, wiping tears from his eyes. "Good Lord," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I forgot how delicate country women can be." The room roared. I looked for my daughter. Savannah had risen halfway from her chair, her face pale, her mouth open like she wanted to say something, but she didn't. She sat back down. That moment burned itself into me. I had buried my husband alone. I had raised my child alone. I had survived things that would have broken other women. But standing there, soaked and mocked, watching my daughter stay silent while the man responsible for her father's death laughed at me, that was a pain I didn't know how to name yet. Preston Montgomery wasn't just my daughter's father-in-law. He was the executive who signed off on the cost-cutting order that killed my husband, Marcus, 20 years earlier. 14 men died when that mine collapsed. The company called it an accident, an act of God. But I'd seen the documents. I still had them. Preston had saved money. We paid in lives. I walked out of the fountain on my own. No one helped me. No one offered a towel. That, too, told me everything I needed to know. As I left the ballroom, dripping water across imported marble, laughter followed me like a soundtrack. Preston didn't try to stop me. He thought he'd won. What he didn't understand was this. Humiliation is only power if it silences you, and I had been silent long enough. That night, as I sat alone in a hotel bathroom, wringing water from my dress, I stopped being just a wounded mother. I became something else again, the woman I had been before grief tried to erase me. An engineer. Someone who knows that when a structure is rotten at its core, it doesn't matter how grand it looks. Eventually, it collapses. Preston had built his life on lies, cruelty, and the assumption that people like me stay down. He was wrong. And this time, when his empire fell, the world would be watching. If this moment hit you the way it hit me, please like this video and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because you might be surprised who near you is listening to this story too. I didn't sleep that night, not even a minute. The hotel bathrobe clung to my damp skin, and the clothes I wore to the wedding sat crumpled in the corner, still wet, still stinking of chlorine and shame. The laughter, the real kind, the mean kind, rattled in my ears like it was still happening. And Preston's face. That damn smile. That cruel pleasure he took in watching me fall. But I didn't cry. Not once. I'd cried all my tears when they lowered Marcus into the ground 20 years ago. After that, I taught myself to survive on steel and silence. Crying doesn't pay bills. Crying doesn't protect your child. And crying sure as hell doesn't scare men like Preston Montgomery. By 6 a.m., I was already dressed plain jeans, work boots, a black flannel shirt. Clothes that made sense. Clothes I trusted. My flight back to Casper wasn't for another 10 hours, but I had somewhere to go first. Somewhere I hadn't been in a long time. The cemetery was quiet, as always. The wind in Wyoming doesn't stop for anyone, not even for the dead. I parked under the same pine tree I used to sit beneath when Savannah was a little girl. She'd play with pebbles while I'd talk to Marcus like he was still there. Sometimes it helped. Sometimes it didn't. I knelt at his grave, brushing pine needles from the stone. Marcus J. Ross, beloved husband, devoted father, taken too soon. I need you to listen, I whispered, though I didn't have to. He always did. Then I told him everything. The wedding, Preston's toast, the gift box, the laughter, Savannah's silence, my fall, my rage, and the fear. Not just mine, but Savannah's. I don't think she's okay, I said. Something's wrong, Marcus. She looks like she's pretending. And Marcus had always known how to read people. I wish he'd been there to read her face, to read that stiff smile she wore all night. I wish he could have seen how she wouldn't meet my eyes. She's scared of him, I whispered. I can feel it. And I could. That's what stayed with me more than the insult, more than the laughter. My daughter, the one I'd raised to speak up, to fight back, had sat in silence while I was dragged through mud. Not out of cruelty. Not out of indifference. Out of fear. I stood up, brushing off my knees. The sun was rising behind the hills, casting golden light across rows of names and dates. I'm going to finish what we started, I said. Not for me. For her. I drove straight from the cemetery to my house. A small one-story brick home on the south side of Casper. Paid off, clean, quiet. The kind of house built on hard work, overtime hours, and coupon clipping. I hadn't been inside the crawl space in years, but I knew exactly where to look. Under the floorboards of my bedroom closet, inside an old military footlocker I'd kept since Marcus died. I had stored it like a time capsule, like evidence no one asked for but I couldn't stop preserving. Inside were newspaper clippings, maintenance reports, inspection logs, a USB drive with photos Marcus had taken 2 weeks before the collapse, the cracked support beams, the rusted brackets, the handwritten notes with his initials in the margins. And then there was the folder, the one that mattered most. The budget revision. A single-page internal memo dated 3 months before the mine collapsed, signed by Preston Montgomery. A directive to reduce cost by eliminating redundant reinforcement, including non-essential bracing in auxiliary shafts. Auxiliary shafts, like the one where Marcus died. I'd held onto that page for 20 years. No one listened then. The lawsuits were settled, the case was closed, and the company paid out just enough to silence the widows. They called it an accident, called it a tragedy. They said Preston had nothing to do with day-to-day operations. But I knew better. And now, he was back. Richer, louder, crueler, with his face on billboards and his hands on my daughter's life. And Savannah didn't know. I had made peace with not getting justice. I had learned to live without it. But now? Now, it was my daughter on the line. That changed everything. I spent the next 5 hours cataloging everything, photographing each document, scanning them into a folder labeled Marcus, 2026. I uploaded the backup to a cloud drive, just in case. I wasn't going to lose them again. Then I called a name I hadn't said out loud in years. Rachel Wilkes. She had been a junior reporter back then, the only journalist who didn't stop digging when the others moved on. We had spoken once, briefly, after Marcus's funeral. She said if I ever found anything else, anything concrete, I should call her. I found her number online. She was working for a bigger paper now. Investigative team, environmental scandals, corporate cover-ups. Exactly what I needed. I left a voicemail. This is Evelyn Ross. You covered the Silver Pine mine collapse in 2006. I kept something. I think it's time we talk. Then I waited. The sun had nearly set when she called back. I remember you, she said. Her voice hadn't changed. Still calm, still serious. I think Preston Montgomery is about to pull another Silver Pine, I said. But this time, he's using my daughter as the fall person. There was silence on the line for a beat. I'm listening, Rachel said. And that was the moment everything changed. Not because I had answers, but because I had questions again. And this time, I wouldn't stop until they were answered. Rachel met me the next morning at a small diner off I-25, the kind of place where the floors stick, the coffee is strong, and nobody asks why you're ordering a full breakfast at 6:30 a.m. We sat in a booth near the window, a pot of black coffee between us, steam rising like something sacred. She hadn't aged the way most people do. The lines around her mouth were deeper. Yes, but they came from truth-telling, not bitterness. Her eyes were sharper than I remembered. I slid the manila folder across the table. She didn't touch it right away. You always carry it? She asked. Always. She opened it. I watched her shoulders stiffen. You know they buried this. She flipped through the documents one by one. The memo, the site inspection log. This handwriting, this is Marcus's? I nodded. He kept copies at home. Said if anything ever went wrong, he wanted the truth somewhere safe. She stared down at the page with the Preston Montgomery signature. He signed it. They all swore he didn't have day-to-day oversight. He lied. And 14 families paid for it. Rachel's lips tightened. And now he's marrying into your family. He's already in. My daughter married his son, Connor. Jesus. She doesn't know. None of it. And she's scared, Rachel. I saw it in her face. She looks like I used to before I got out. Rachel set the folder aside. Tell me everything. Start from the beginning. So I did. The wedding, the toast, the box, the fountain, the silence. And then I told her about the documents, about Savannah's fear, about the way Preston looked at me like he'd already planned the next 10 moves. She didn't interrupt. She just took notes in a small leather notebook, old school. When I finished, she asked only one question. Why now? I paused. Then, because she's mine, and she's in danger. I don't care about revenge anymore, but I'll burn his empire to the ground if it keeps my daughter safe. I make sudden. Rachel nodded slowly, like someone mentally moving pieces on a chessboard. Preston Montgomery has a clean public record. His net worth is over $200 million. He chairs 3 foundations, has a pending Senate endorsement, and a line of business interests so tangled it would take a team of analysts to untie it. I'm not scared of money. No, she said. But money plays dirty. I looked her dead in the eye. So do mothers. Rachel smiled. Just a little. Okay, here's what we'll do. I'll start digging. Quietly. You stay close to Savannah. Try to find anything out of place. Financial, emotional, medical. If Preston's using her for something, it'll leave a trail. And if it's already started, then we follow it. We left the diner separately. She gave me a burner phone, a Gmail login, and instructions not to tell anyone, not even Savannah, about our meetings. I agreed. Some truths need to be protected until they're strong enough to be used. On the drive home, my mind kept drifting back to that night at the wedding. Not to Preston's voice, not to the laughter, but to Savannah's hands, how they never unclenched. It was more than fear. It was control. She was trying to hold herself still. When I got home, I found myself standing in her old bedroom. She hadn't lived here in years, but I'd never changed it. The posters, the ribbons, the pencil cup with "Build to Last," still etched into the side. She left it behind. That was the part that finally made me cry. I hadn't expected it. 1 second I was standing, the next I was on the floor, holding that damn cup like it was her, like it was the child version of her I could still protect. She didn't just marry into danger. She walked away from herself. I made a list that night, a real pen-to-paper list. Not just of Preston's crimes, but of everything I still didn't know. What is Savannah hiding? Why did she marry Connor so quickly? What's in it for Preston besides power? Are there others involved? What would Marcus have done? I didn't have answers, but I had Rachel, I had evidence, and I had time. Not much, but enough. Because if there's one thing I learned in construction, it's this. Every collapse starts with a small crack. You don't always hear it. You don't always see it. But it's there, and once you find it, you know where to strike. I hadn't seen Savannah alone since the wedding. Every time I tried to reach out, calls, texts, even stopping by her office, she was busy, unavailable, or politely evasive. Not cold, just distant. That polished kind of distance you only learn when you're being watched. So I stopped pushing. Instead, I waited. The opportunity came 2 weeks later, under the pretense of a Sunday brunch. Connor had called me himself, sounding chipper, apologetic, and just a little too rehearsed. "Savannah's been meaning to see you. She's had a lot going on since the wedding. Come by the house, Evelyn. She'll be glad." That was the first time he called me by my name instead of "ma'am." I took note. The Montgomery estate sat just outside Sheridan, on a rise overlooking the river. Built like a boutique hotel, white pillars, symmetrical hedges, a front door so big you felt like a trespasser walking through it. The drive up alone made my pulse quicken. It wasn't fear, it was memory. The kind of memory your body stores in your skin. Savannah greeted me at the door with a hug that lasted just a second too long, like she wasn't sure whether to let go or hold on. "You look tired," I said gently. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "It's been a busy few weeks." End quote. "Since the wedding?" A slight pause. "Yes." Connor came in behind her, all bright teeth and warm hands. "Evelyn, welcome. Coffee? Or something stronger?" He laughed like we were all in on a private joke. I forced a smile. "Coffee's fine." We made polite conversation over a glass table that looked like it cost more than my car. I let them talk. I let them perform. Connor spoke about a new land deal. Savannah asked about weather in Casper. Everything was cordial, perfect, pleasant, fake. Then Connor stepped out to take a call. And the moment the door clicked shut, the air changed. Savannah exhaled like she'd been holding her breath. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice low. She hesitated. "I'm adjusting." "To what?" She blinked. "Mom, please don't start." "I'm not starting anything. I'm listening." She stood up and walked toward the window, arms folded tightly. "I know what you think, that I've made some huge mistake, that I married into a monster's family. But it's not like that." "No?" I said. "Because he humiliated me in front of 3,000 people, Savannah. And you didn't even flinch." Her shoulders tensed. I didn't know what to do. It all happened so fast. "No," I said. "It didn't. That kind of cruelty doesn't happen fast. It's practiced." She turned to face me, eyes glassy. "Do you think I don't know what he did to Dad?" My breath caught. She nodded, voice cracking. "I found the reports years ago. I saw the memo. I know who Preston Montgomery is." "And you still married into that family?" "I thought I could fix it," she said. "That if I got close enough, I could keep an eye on him, protect what matters, maybe even use his own network against him someday." I stared at her, stunned. "You think this is some long con?" "I think it's survival." Her voice was bitter. "The world doesn't hand justice to women like us. We have to build it brick by brick, even if it means dining with the devil." End quote. "Savannah," I said carefully, "has he threatened you?" She said nothing. I stepped closer. "Connor?" "No," she said quickly. "Connor's different. He doesn't know. He worships his father. And I—" She stopped herself. "It's complicated." I placed my hand on hers. "You don't have to do this alone." She pulled away gently. "But I do. Because if I don't, who will?" Just then, Connor re-entered, smiling like he hadn't missed a thing. "Business never sleeps," he said, picking up his cup. We were just talking about old times. Something like that, Savannah said, her face returning to neutral. I nodded, forcing calm. I was just about to ask Savannah for a copy of the wedding guest list. I remembered someone I wanted to follow up with. Of course, Connor said. We'll get that to you. I left the house with the list in my purse and 1,000 questions in my mind. She knew. She knew everything. And she was playing a dangerous game with a man who'd buried worse secrets than we could imagine. But she wasn't just surviving. She was plotting, just like I was. Later that night, I opened the guest list and cross-referenced the names with Rachel. One name stood out. David Walsh, senior project engineer at Montgomery Resource Group. And Savannah had seated him right next to Connor. I recognized his name the moment I saw it, David Walsh. I remembered him from the old crew. Back before the collapse, back when Marcus was still alive and still laughing at his own terrible puns, David was the quiet one, the engineer with the clipboard and the tired eyes. Never one to cause trouble, never one to miss a safety check. And yet, there he was, listed on the wedding guest list under table 4, right beside Connor. Savannah had placed him close, very close, almost as if she wanted him to hear every word Preston said that night. I called Rachel the next morning. I need you to dig on David Walsh. She didn't ask why. Give me 2 hours. She called back in 90 minutes. Still lives in Casper, she said. Left Montgomery Resource Group 5 years ago. No lawsuits, no public complaints. But there's a pattern. After he left, he bounced between smaller firms, all with short-term contracts. Looks like someone blacklisted him. He was at the wedding, I said. Savannah put him next to Connor. Rachel paused. That's not a coincidence. I was also. No, I said. It's a signal. 2 days later, I found him. He was working part-time at a hardware store off the highway, wearing a red vest and unloading lumber for a customer when I approached him. His beard was thicker than I remembered, his back more hunched, but the eyes were the same, tired, watchful. He looked at me for half a second and said, I thought you might come. I blinked. You remember me? I remember Marcus, he said, and I remember what they did to you after he died. I've knowed. He finished helping the customer, then motioned me toward a break room in the back. It smelled like burnt coffee and old paint, but it was private. He sat across from me, arms folded. You were at the wedding, I said. He nodded. Savannah asked me to be there. Told me I'd see something I'd want to remember. Did you? I saw Preston show his teeth, he said, and I saw her sit there like she wasn't scared, but I know she is. She's in deep, I said. Too deep. David rubbed his jaw. She came to see me a month ago, said she needed someone who knew where the bones were buried. I told her I kept the files, not all of them, but enough. She asked if I'd be willing to talk, to testify, if it came to that. And I told her yes. Why? He looked at me hard. Because I watched your husband die, and I've watched that man Preston walk around like none of it mattered. He gets richer, we get quieter. That's how it works, unless someone breaks the pattern. I leaned forward. Do you still have the files? He reached into his coat and pulled out a small flash drive, setting it on the table. I've made copies, multiple. But this one's for you. I took it, fingers trembling slightly. What's on it? Internal memos, budget cuts, safety override approvals. Preston's name is on more than just that one memo, Evelyn. He's been pulling strings for decades. Most of it's buried in technical jargon, but you'll see the pattern. End quote. End quote. And what about now? Is he planning another project? David nodded slowly. Summit Ridge. I sat up straighter. That's the one Connor mentioned at brunch. Said it's a land development deal. It's more than that, David said. It's a geological risk zone. Fault lines too close. They're cutting corners again, this time with seismic reinforcements. One good shake, and it'll crumble. But the permits are clean because the tests were falsified. Jesus. Savannah knew. She asked me for names. I gave her some. Inspectors, engineers, paper trails. I think she's trying to build a case. She's in over her head. She's playing a long game, he said. Like her mother. That stopped me. I'm not playing, I said. I'm retaliating. He smiled, just a little. Same thing, if you do it right. I DM. I left the store with the flash drive in my coat pocket and my heart pounding like it used to when I drove Marcus's truck up the canyon in winter, knowing one wrong move could send me over the edge. Rachel called that night. I told her about Summit Ridge, the falsified reports, the risk zone. "We need eyes inside the project," she said. "Someone with access. Savannah's too visible." "Connor?" I hesitated. "He doesn't know who his father is." "Then maybe it's time he finds out." End quote. The 70 everyone's obspect. I stared at my phone for a long time before calling him. Connor Montgomery, my daughter's husband, my daughter's protector, maybe, or pawn. I wasn't sure yet. All I knew was he loved her, or at least he believed he did. That mattered. Because if we had any chance of stopping Preston before another disaster happened, we needed someone inside the walls, someone close to the top, someone who had access not just to paper, but to people. I knew what I was about to do could break my daughter's marriage. But if Savannah was right, if she was pretending, enduring, collecting evidence from the inside, then maybe she had already accepted the risk. Maybe she was hoping I would make the first move. So I did. I texted him, "Can we talk?" Alone. "Not about Savannah. About Summit Ridge. It's important." He replied within 2 minutes. "Tomorrow. My office. 9 a.m. I'll make sure we're not disturbed." His office was downtown, sleek glass, minimalist decor, and the kind of espresso machine that looked like it cost more than my first car. His assistant greeted me with a smile so bright I had to look away. Connor opened the door before she could buzz me in. "Come in, Evelyn." He gestured toward a leather chair. I sat. He closed the door. "No small talk. You said it wasn't about Savannah, but if this hurts her, I'm here to protect her," I said. "Even if it means hurting you. You have a station are the skade." He blinked just once, like someone bracing for a slap. "Okay," he said. "Talk." I pulled out a flash drive, the one David had given me. I set it on his desk. "Summit Ridge is a geological risk. Your father is moving forward with full construction, knowing the seismic reinforcements are falsified. He's forging test results, cutting corners. Again." "Connor didn't move. He did this 20 years ago," I said. "At Silver Pine. My husband died because of it. So did 13 other men. He signed off on reduced supports. I have the memo. You saw the way he treated me at the wedding? That wasn't personal. That was panic." "Panic?" "He knows I know. And he thinks if he humiliates me enough, I'll disappear again." Connor finally spoke. "You think my father's planning to let Summit Ridge fail?" "I think he's willing to risk it. The permits are clean on paper, but the actual site is unstable. David Walsh gave me internal files, emails, altered reports, flagged inspections. It's all there." Connor stared at the flash drive like it might bite him. "I need access," I said. "Blueprints, vendor contracts, subcontractor lists, anything that ties your father to that site." He leaned back, exhaling slowly. "You're asking me to betray my family. I'm asking you to protect mine." His jaw tightened. "Savannah." "She knows," I said. That hit him like a body blow. "She came to me weeks ago," I continued. "Told me she knew what your father did to Marcus. Told me she was trying to get close enough to stop him." He looked stricken. "She didn't tell me." "She couldn't," I said. "Because you love your father, and real love makes you blind." He rubbed his temples. "I can't just go rifling through his files, Evelyn. He's careful, paranoid. Half the office is divided between real departments and shell ones. The legal stuff is locked tighter than anything I've ever seen." "You don't need to break into Fort Knox," I said. "Just pay attention. Look for patterns, conversations, expense accounts, company names that show up too often. Even a whisper is something." Connor stood and walked to the window. He stayed there a long time. "I always thought he was tough," he said. "Ruthless even, but fair and brilliant. I wanted to believe that being his son meant something good." "It still can," I said, "but you get to decide what kind of legacy you carry." He turned around, slowly. "If I do this, if I help you and I find something, you bring it to me," I said. "Not the police, not the press, me." "Why?" "Because once this starts, Savannah becomes a target, and I need to be the shield." He nodded, just once. "Okay," he said. "Give me a week." As I left the office, I didn't feel relief. Not yet. There were too many ways this could go wrong. Connor was still a Montgomery, still a man raised by Preston's rules. But I also saw the crack, the hesitation, the pain, the uncertainty. And cracks, as I've learned, are where the truth starts to leak through. The hardest part of any plan isn't the research, it's the waiting. Waiting for someone else to do what you hope they're brave enough to do. Waiting while the enemy keeps moving, smiling, deceiving. Waiting while your child sleeps in a house built by the man who once reduced your life to a widow's pension and an empty dinner chair. I spent the next week back in Casper, pretending to live a normal life. I kept my routine morning walks, grocery trips, volunteering at the community center, but every hour felt stretched thin, like I was trying to live beneath the weight of 100 unsaid things. Connor hadn't called. Rachel checked in every other day, tracking recent permits issued for Summit Ridge. "There's movement," she said on a Wednesday morning call. "Equipment contracts, quiet subleases. Looks like they're building fast and dirty." "He's rushing it," I said. "He knows we're circling." By Friday, I couldn't wait anymore. I texted Connor just 3 words. "Anything to share?" He didn't reply. Saturday morning, I drove back to Sheridan. I didn't go to the house. I went to the site, Summit Ridge. It wasn't fenced yet, too early in the process. But the land was marked. Orange flags and survey stakes dotted the sloping hills like plastic tombstones. Heavy machinery sat in the mud, idle for the weekend, gleaming under the overcast sky. The terrain looked peaceful, but I knew better. This place was a risk zone, an unsteady plate of rock and memory. I walked the perimeter, slowly. I wasn't trespassing yet, but I needed to see it, feel it. I had spent half my life reading ground for structural flaws, and this land was screaming. Loose soil, shallow bedrock, patches of fractured shale, all signs of weakness. And Preston was planning to erect a commercial complex on it. A voice interrupted my thoughts. "You shouldn't be here." I turned. It was Connor. He stood at the edge of the lot, hands in his coat pockets, eyes narrowed, not angry, not surprised, just cautious. "You followed me," I said. "No. I came to clear my head." He paused. "You're not the only one who can't sleep anymore." I stepped toward him. "You found something." He hesitated. Then he pulled a folder from inside his coat and handed it to me. I opened it carefully. Inside, invoices, digital memos, contractor schedules. One name showed up 5 times, Axis Groundworks LLC, listed as a subcontractor for soil testing and reinforcement. "That's not one of your regular vendors," I said. "No," he said. "It's a shell company, registered to a holding firm in Nevada, but the money trails back to a subsidiary my father created last year." End quote. End quote. Also vilely stirred bitters. And the tests? They were fabricated. I found 2 versions, one with true geological readings, one doctored. My chest tightened. "Does Savannah know?" He shook his head. "Not yet. I wanted to be sure." "You're sure now?" "I am." I exhaled slowly. "So we build the case." Connor nodded, but his face darkened. "There's more. Not about Summit Ridge, about Savannah." I tensed. "What is it?" He looked away for a long time, then back. "She's being watched. I noticed someone tailing her last week, same car, 3 different days. I had security sweep the house. There was a listening device in her office." "Preston?" He nodded. I confronted him. He called it precautionary. Said she's been distracted lately, that he's just trying to protect the brand. "Brand," I repeated, the word bitter on my tongue. "He thinks she's property. He thinks everyone is." Connor looked at me, eyes tired. "I didn't believe you," he said. "Not fully. Not until now." "And Savannah?" "She's breaking," he said quietly. "But she won't show it. She's like you. She hides it in her jawline." I clenched mine, reflexively. "We have to move fast," I said, "before Preston locks it all down, before he finds your folder." "I've got a second copy," Connor said. "Off-site. Password protected." I nodded, proud of him and terrified for him. We stood in silence for a moment. Just the wind and the hum of distant machines. "Connor," I said, "when this starts, there's no undoing it. He will come for you." He met my gaze without flinching. "Then he'll finally see who I am." I turned and looked at the flagged dirt again. So fragile, so dangerous, so full of secrets. Foundation matters, I said. What you build on determines what survives. Connor didn't speak. He didn't have to, because we were already standing on the edge of collapse. Savannah didn't answer the door when I knocked. That wasn't like her. Even when things were strained between us, she always opened the door with some kind of smile, even if it was tight, even if it didn't touch her eyes. This time, nothing. I knocked again. Louder. A light flickered in the upstairs window. I stepped back, looked up, and saw her standing there, half hidden behind the curtain. She wasn't dressed for the day. Her hair was still tangled, her face pale. For a moment, I wondered if she'd been crying. But when our eyes met, she didn't move. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I just stood there and waited. Eventually, the curtain dropped. 3 minutes later, the door creaked open. "Mom," she said, her voice hoarse, barely there. "I brought you breakfast," I said, lifting the paper bag from the diner. She opened the door wider. I walked inside. The house was too quiet, too clean. The kind of clean that didn't feel lived in. No TV murmuring in the background. No music. No smells from the kitchen. Just polished silence and a faint trace of lavender air freshener that felt more like disguise than comfort. She led me to the kitchen table. I unpacked the breakfast eggs, toast, hash browns, and set her plate in front of her. She didn't touch it. "Connor said you've been tired," I said. She didn't respond. "You want to tell me what's going on?" She stared at her plate for a long time, then looked up. "He bugged my office. I didn't need to ask who. I thought I could outmaneuver him," she said. "Get close enough to pull files, find patterns, get names. But he was ahead of me." "No," I said. "He's paranoid. That's different." She shook her head. I was sloppy. I left a folder open. I stayed too long at the wrong building. I asked questions I shouldn't have. "He's watching you now," I said. "We know. Connor found the bug." She laughed a low, bitter sound. "So now they're both watching me. Great." "Connor's not watching," I said. "He's protecting." She looked at me sharply. "How do you know?" "Because he came to me, gave me files, confirmed everything." Savannah blinked. "He did?" I nodded. She looked down, swallowed hard. "He must really love me." "Yes," I said. "He does." She reached for the fork but didn't eat, just held it in her hand, like an anchor. "I'm tired, Mom," she whispered. "Tired of pretending, tired of walking on glass, tired of smiling at people who think I'm some rich trophy wife while my father-in-law tries to turn me into a liability." "You're not a liability." "I'm a signature away from being the next scapegoat if something goes wrong at Summit Ridge," she said. "You think Preston keeps me close because he likes me? I'm a firewall, someone to take the hit if the foundation cracks." I didn't deny it, because she was right. "He's moving fast," I said. "Rachel's tracking the subcontractors. The ground isn't stable. The reinforcements are falsified. We're running out of time." Savannah finally set the fork down. "I wanted to do this quietly," she said, "without dragging you into it, without risking Connor, but it's too big. That's why we do it together." She shook her head. "You don't understand. Preston, he doesn't just destroy people financially. He rewrites their past. He erases them. He buries them in NDAs and legal threats and character assassinations. If we go after him, we don't get to stop halfway." "I know. And if something happens to me—" "Stop." I reached across the table, grabbed her hand. "Nothing's going to happen to you. Not while I'm still breathing." Her grip tightened. "What do we do next?" she asked. "We start building the story," I said. "Rachel will publish when we have enough. But we also need legal coverage, whistleblower protection. And we need to prepare for fallout because once the first story drops, Preston will come at us with everything." "I have something," she said. "A spreadsheet. Not much, but it's got vendor codes, invoice gaps, flagged payments. Enough to start the thread. Send it to Rachel." She nodded. I stood to leave. "And Savannah?" "Yeah?" "I'm proud of you." Her eyes welled up, but she blinked them clear. As I walked out the front door, I saw the same car parked 2 houses down. Same dent in the bumper, same tinted windows. They were still watching her. Good. Let them watch. Because we were ready to show them something worth seeing. The car was still there the next day. Same place, same angle, like a dog pretending not to beg. I parked around the block and walked to Savannah's house on foot, ducking behind hedges and fence posts like I was back in some high school stealth game. The ridiculousness of it hit me halfway up the sidewalk, but only for a second. Then I saw her front door crack open before I even knocked. She was expecting me. "I ran the plates," she said before I could speak. "It's registered to a private security firm in Montana, but the firm's owned by a shell company. 3 guesses who signed the Articles of Incorporation." "Preston." She nodded. I followed her inside. The air was sharp with bleach she'd been cleaning again, compulsively. That was her tell. Always had been. When she was little, she'd rearrange her sock drawer every time she had a secret. "He's going to make his move soon," she said, heading into the kitchen. "Summit Ridge is accelerating. He's already scheduled the press release about the groundbreaking ceremony for next month." "Then we do it first," I said. Savannah turned. "We release the story?" "No, not yet, but we start leaking the cracks." Rachel had given us the outline. 3 stages: subtle exposure, undeniable proof, then the knockout. The first leak would be small, just enough to stir whispers. A discrepancy in a contract, an anonymous tip, something the right journalists could dig into without triggering Preston's legal army too soon. "We start with the seismic reports," I said. "The real ones. The ones David gave us." Savannah nodded slowly, then opened her laptop. "I cleaned metadata, anonymized the files. They're ready. Rachel's ready too. Because the scram." I texted Rachel a code phrase we'd agreed on, shovel in hand. Within minutes, she confirmed receipt. "Where's Connor?" I asked. "At work," she said, then paused. "He doesn't know about today. Are you going to tell him?" "I don't want to put him in that position. Not yet." "He's already in it," I said, "but it's your call." She closed the laptop and looked at me. "Do you think Dad would be proud?" The question broke something in me. "Yes," I said. "Because you're not just surviving anymore. You're fighting." Savannah looked down. "I'm scared." So was I. So was every woman who stood alone against men like Preston. But scared doesn't mean weak. It means you still have something to lose. Her phone buzzed. A message. She read it, and her face went still. "What is it?" I asked. She handed me the screen. It was a calendar invite. From Preston. Subject: family dinner, mandatory. Location: the Manor. Time: 7 p.m. Note: please don't make this difficult. My chest tightened. "He knows," I said. "Not everything, but enough to get nervous. You can't go. I have to. If I don't, he'll know I'm moving against him. I'll go with you." She shook her head. "No, if you show up, it escalates." "Savannah." "I'll wear a wire," she said. I stared at her. "I bought one," she added. "Off a journalist's recommendation, small, hidden in my necklace. You shouldn't be doing this." "No," she said, "but I'm doing it anyway." She left to get ready. I waited in the living room, surrounded by her carefully curated furniture, her framed wedding photos, the flower arrangements that looked too perfect to be real. All of it was staged. Like she had created a life that looked good from the outside, so no one would knock too hard on the walls. I watched her come down the stairs in a soft gray dress and a steady face. "I'll be back by 9, she said. "You call me the moment it's over." She nodded. "Be careful." Savannah kissed my cheek and left. And I sat there, staring at the door long after it closed, knowing I had just sent my daughter into a lion's den with nothing but a microphone and her courage. Savannah walked into the Montgomery estate like a soldier walking into occupied territory, shoulders squared, dress ironed, smile carefully fixed in place. The house was glowing with warm lights, candles lit at every corner, a table set for 6, though only 3 would be seated tonight. Preston greeted her with open arms and that immaculate, surgically precise smile. His hair was slicked back, not a strand out of place, and he wore a burgundy suit that screamed vanity more than elegance. "Darling," he said, kissing her cheek. "You're late." "Traffic," she replied evenly. He led her into the dining room, where a roast duck was already carved, the air thick with citrus and rosemary. Wine glasses were filled. The silverware gleamed. Connor was already seated. He gave her a quick glance, half curiosity, half concern. She couldn't read him in that moment, but she nodded gently, the way they used to when they were children passing notes in church. Dinner began with no small talk. Preston poured the wine himself. To family, he said. The ones we choose and the ones we make. Savannah didn't raise her glass. Something wrong with the toast? Preston asked, setting his glass down and tilting his head just slightly, like a predator playing with a rabbit. I just prefer actions over words, she said. He smiled. Good, he said, because I've taken some actions of my own. The silence sharpened. Preston cut a slice of duck, chewed it thoughtfully. Then, with casual precision, he dropped the bomb. I've noticed some confusion lately. Financial irregularities, conflicting inquiries, people snooping where they shouldn't. Makes me wonder if someone under my roof is feeling disloyal. Connor stiffened. Savannah blinked slowly. Is there a reason you're saying this to me? Preston laughed. I'm saying it to both of you, because I believe in transparency and loyalty and knowing who's at the table before you serve the poison. He turned to Connor. Son, did you know your wife met with David Walsh? Connor didn't move. I know everything, Preston said. And when I say everything, I mean texts, calls, locations. The things you think are deleted, they aren't. Nothing's ever gone, not if you own the server. He sipped his wine. Savannah felt the necklace press against her skin, the wire embedded in its clasp recording every syllable. I know you think you're doing the right thing, Preston continued, eyes on her now. That exposing me is some noble cause. That dragging my name through the dirt will cleanse yours. But let me be clear, Savannah. You are nothing without this family. Your career, your reputation, your comfort, they're all borrowed. And I can repossess them anytime I want. Connor finally spoke. You're threatening her? No, Preston said calmly. I'm educating her. The world runs on leverage. She chose to forget that. You lied about Summit Ridge, Connor said. You falsified the ground reports. And people could die. Preston leaned back, genuinely amused. That's the difference between you and me, son. You think people matter more than power. That's why you'll always be second. Savannah's hand trembled under the table. You married her, Preston continued, voice tightening now. You brought her into this family. And now, you're conspiring with her against me. Both of you. That's not just betrayal. That's stupidity. He stood. Dinner's over. Connor stood too. We're not afraid of you. Preston smirked. You should be. He turned to Savannah. And you? You're already gone. You just haven't realized it yet. He left the room. They sat there in silence for a full minute before Savannah finally breathed. Connor looked at her. Was it recording? She nodded. We have him, she whispered. No, Connor said. We have the beginning. They left the house without looking back. Savannah called me from the car, her voice shaking. I got it, Mom, she said. Every word. I didn't tell her to come home. I didn't tell her to be proud. I just said the one thing I knew she needed to hear. You're not alone. Rachel uploaded the recording at dawn. Not to the front page. Not with a byline. Just a private share link to 3 senior editors at 3 different national outlets. People she trusted. People who had chased power before and weren't afraid of it. By noon, they were calling back. By 2 p.m., we had a strategy. First wave is contextual, Rachel explained over the phone. We release a small exposé. Not the recording yet. Just the Summit Ridge documents soil falsifications, vendor fraud, conflict of interest. It's dry enough to not seem explosive, but deep enough to raise eyebrows. What's the goal? I asked. To shake the walls, she said. See who runs first. If Preston has allies, they'll start trying to cover their tracks. End of story. Won't he know we're behind it? He already knows, she said. But he can't prove it. And that buys us time. The article dropped on a Monday morning, buried just deep enough not to scream scandal, but not so deep it could be ignored. The headline was clinical, almost boring, construction irregularities flagged in Summit Ridge development. But the content hit like a hammer. Within hours, subcontractors were calling lawyers. One of the junior engineers at Axis Groundworks posted a vague tweet about not signing off on a site like that. Investors started demanding clarification. The company's PR team issued a bland denial. And Preston? He went quiet. Too quiet. He's not panicking, I told Savannah. He's calculating. We sat in her kitchen, side by side for the first time in weeks. She looked tired but focused. Her phone buzzed, constantly calls, emails, press inquiries. She let them pile up. She was waiting, just like me, for the second crack. Connor joined us later, laptop in hand. I accessed the holding company records for Axis, he said. Cross-referenced the board members. 2 of them sit on Preston's charity board. He's been funneling Summit Ridge money through philanthropic grants. Savannah whistled. So, he's laundering bad construction through clean goodwill. Exactly. Rachel called an hour later. We've got a problem. I sat up straighter. What kind of problem? There's a leak inside our circle. Someone tipped Preston off that a whistleblower is coming. My blood ran cold. David? I asked. He's missing. Savannah froze. What do you mean missing? I demanded. I had a call scheduled with him this morning. He didn't show. I sent someone to check. His apartment's empty. No sign of struggle. No forwarding address. Connor stood. You think Preston forced him out? Rachel hesitated. Or bought him out? No, I said. David wouldn't take a deal. Everyone has a price, she said quietly. Or a pressure point. Savannah looked sick. What do we do now? We move up the timeline, Rachel said. We release the recording. No, I said. Not yet. Evelyn, if we drop it now, it looks retaliatory, desperate. We need one more piece. Something that ties Preston to physical harm. Something real. Like what? Connor asked. Like David, I said. I'll find him, Savannah said suddenly. You? I turned to her. He trusted me, she said, and he was scared. If he ran, he didn't run far. Savannah, I need to do this, she said. You've protected me my whole life. Let me protect someone else. Connor didn't argue. He just handed her a list. 3 old phone numbers, 2 storage units, 1 P.O. box he kept when he worked with my father. If he left breadcrumbs, they'll be here. She kissed me on the cheek, then left without another word. As the door closed, I felt it again, that mix of pride and terror that comes when your child becomes something more than a child. She was in it now, deep, and I couldn't stop her. But I could clear the path. Savannah started with the storage units. There were 2 addresses on opposite sides of town, one near the old train yard, the other by the water treatment plant. Both were rented under a fake name, but the key numbers matched an entry in David's original files. He'd left them there for a reason. She went alone. She didn't tell me where until afterward, said it was safer that way. I understood, even if it killed me a little. The first unit was empty. Just concrete and dust and a coil of unused wire in the corner, as if someone had started to build a story there and then abandoned it. The second unit was different. She said it smelled like metal and oil and something colder, like a basement that hadn't seen light in years. Inside were boxes, carefully stacked, all labeled in David's handwriting. Some said test logs, others said Axis invoices, and one pushed furthest into the back simply said, in case. That was the one Savannah opened first. Inside, a burner phone, 2 USB drives, and a handwritten letter. Savannah, if you're reading this, then either I panicked or I'm gone. Either way, the game's changed. There's more than Summit Ridge. Preston's involved in retroactive site approvals going back a decade, at least 3 other projects with falsified safety sign-offs, 2 in Montana, 1 in Utah. People died, not just minors, residents. Kids. He made sure it never touched him. The phone has contact logs. Use them. Trust no one who works above regional level. They're all tied in somehow. And tell Evelyn, I'm sorry. Savannah took the box and drove straight to Rachel. When they plugged in the phone, it exploded with information. Call logs, voicemails, text exchanges, photos of reports, scans of ledger entries, even 2 video recordings of Preston in private meetings signing off on emergency budget reallocation, laughing at the term non-essential personnel. Rachel stared at the screen for a long time before speaking. This is it, she said. This blows it all open. But Savannah wasn't smiling. What's wrong? Rachel asked. He's going to know it was me, she whispered. If he didn't already, this will confirm it. Rachel placed a hand on her shoulder. Then we don't wait. We go all in. I met them at Rachel's office an hour later. She laid it all out for me, what Savannah found, what the files contained, how every thread Preston tried to hide was now exposed like raw nerve. It's time, Rachel said. We publish. I looked at Savannah. Her eyes were clear. No fear, just fatigue and fury and a resolve that had taken root so deep it wouldn't budge. "You okay?" I asked. "No," she said, "but I'm ready." Rachel scheduled the drop for 6 a.m. The next day, East Coast news cycle timing, national release, full story, names, dates, audio, video, everything. We didn't sleep that night. We sat in my living room, drinking tea we didn't taste, watching the minutes tick by like they were counting down to a detonation. Connor called around midnight. "I just got an alert," he said. "Dad's legal team booked 3 emergency calls, 2 to D.C., 1 international." "He knows," I said. "He's coming." "Let him." At 5:57 a.m., Rachel hit publish. The story went live, and the world began to shake. By 7:15 a.m., it was the top story on every major news network. Montgomery Empire accused of multi-state construction fraud. Leaked audio reveals Preston Montgomery laughing over non-essential lives. Whistleblower tied to Summit Ridge disappears. Source says fear of retaliation. Preston's face was everywhere, smiling in headshots, frowning in courtroom sketches, frozen mid-sentence in stills from the leaked footage. The video of him calling safety regulations theatrical nonsense for the working class played on loop. Social media went nuclear. Employees began speaking anonymously. Old case files reopened. Reporters dug into every foundation, every collapsed school roof, every unexplained cost overrun. There was too much smoke for there not to be fire. And Preston? Still no comment. Savannah stayed with me that morning. She paced the living room in my old flannel robe, her hair pulled back, hands trembling each time her phone buzzed. Rachel was fielding interviews. Connor was already in meetings with legal counsel. I made coffee. Then came the knock on the door. I opened it, expecting a reporter. It was Preston, not flanked by lawyers, not hiding behind security. Just him, alone. He looked smaller somehow. Not physically, he was still tall, still sharp in his tailored coat, but something inside him had folded. A man used to ruling the room, now standing in someone else's doorway like he'd misplaced his crown. "Evelyn," he said, smiling like it meant something. "May I come in?" "No." His smile twitched. "I just want to talk to Savannah. She doesn't want to see you. Let her say that." "She already did." He exhaled, slowly. "Look, I know you think you've won something. A headline. A story. But this," he gestured broadly, "this isn't over. It's noise. It'll fade." I crossed my arms. "So will your name." His eyes narrowed. "You think your little crusade can touch what I've built?" "You didn't build anything," I said. "You cut corners. You buried truth. And you piled bodies high enough to stand on. That's not a legacy. That's a grave." His jaw clenched. "Careful, Evelyn. The press loves a martyr, but they move on quick. You've stirred up a mess. Are you ready to watch your daughter dragged through it? Are you ready to explain a bug in your dining room, a wire in your own house?" He stepped closer. "You think this ends with a story and a few angry donors?" "No," I said. "It ends when someone in handcuffs says your name in court." Behind me, Savannah appeared. Quiet, composed. "Dad," she said. Preston looked up, relief flickering across his face. But she didn't soften. "You can leave now," she said. "Sweetheart, you called me a liability." His mouth opened, then closed. She stepped beside me. "You once said I was nothing without this family," she continued. "But the truth is this family was nothing without our silence. That ends today." End quote. "The sin for Sedavid Portneuf loves." She closed the door in his face. Neither of us moved for a long moment. Then I exhaled. Savannah turned to me. "He'll come after us." "Let him try." My phone buzzed. Rachel again. "Evelyn," she said, "they've issued a federal inquiry. FBI's opening a preliminary investigation into all 3 state contracts." I closed my eyes. "Good," I said. "Let's keep pushing." Because the building had cracked. Now it was time to bring it down. They came for Preston 2 days later. Not quietly. The morning air was cold and sharp as glass when 4 unmarked SUVs rolled up to the Montgomery estate. It was just past 8 a.m., and the neighbors were still walking their dogs and sipping coffee on porches when the agents in black windbreakers swarmed the house. The footage hit the news within minutes, Preston being led out in handcuffs, head held high, jaw tight, lips pressed into a defiant line. He didn't resist, he didn't speak, But the set of his shoulders told a different story. He'd lost control. The Department of Justice released a statement by noon. Investigations into fraud, conspiracy, and criminal negligence tied to construction projects in Wyoming, Montana, and Utah. The phrase, linked to multiple civilian deaths, echoed across every channel. It was no longer just a scandal. It was a criminal case. Savannah and I watched it all unfold from my living room, the same place we'd brewed this storm. We didn't cheer. We didn't cry. We just sat in silence, two women who had carried the truth for too long, finally setting it down. Connor arrived mid-afternoon, eyes red, tie undone. "He's not speaking," he said, "to anyone, not even his lawyers." "Let him stay silent," Savannah said. "It's the only honest thing he's ever done." Rachel called next. Her voice was breathless. "The whistleblower protections are holding. David's safe." "Where?" I asked. "Out of state. He left before Preston even knew he was a risk. Smart man." End quote. "Will he testify?" "He said he would." I closed my eyes in relief. Savannah reached for my hand. "There's something else," Rachel added. "Preston's board just voted him out of all executive positions. They're calling it a moral decision." I laughed dry, bitter. "There's nothing moral about self-preservation." She agreed. "But it's a crack in his foundation, and it's growing." By sunset, the Montgomery brand was in free fall. Banks froze assets, shareholders panicked, philanthropic partners cut ties. Every skeleton he'd buried was clawing its way out of the ground. And still, Preston said nothing. No apology, no statement, just a blank wall of arrogance and silence. It was almost funny. For a man who built his legacy on loud power, he was going to be buried in quiet disgrace. Savannah and Connor spent the night at my house. It was the first time in years she'd slept in her childhood bedroom. I peeked in on her once, the way I used to when she was 5 and afraid of thunder. She wasn't afraid now. She was rebuilding. I sat in the kitchen with Connor, the air between us finally still. "I never wanted this," he said. "I know," I replied. "But you didn't run from it." He nodded. "What happens now?" "Now?" I said, pouring 2 mugs of tea. "Now we heal." The next morning, a letter arrived. No return address. Just my name. Inside, a typed sheet of paper. A full confession, signed by Preston Montgomery. He named names, outlined the fraud, the deaths, the lies. It was the final crack, and the building finally collapsed. The confession was time-stamped at 4:12 a.m., likely written from a holding cell or the sterile silence of a pre-dawn interrogation room. The signature was unmistakable Preston Montgomery's trademark scrawl, sharp and arrogant even in surrender. Rachel verified it by noon. "It's real," she said. "He's offering it in exchange for leniency, full cooperation, no public trial, reduced sentencing." Savannah sat at my kitchen table, arms folded tight against her chest. "So he gets to walk away?" "No," Rachel said. "He'll still serve time, but less." "How much less?" 10 years, she said. "Minimum security." Connor leaned forward. "And everyone else?" 4 executives named, 1 already flipped. The rest are lawyering up. DOJ's moving fast, indictments expected this week. It is a Clyer. Savannah's jaw clenched. "He always lands on his feet." "No," I said quietly. "He landed in a cage. Just not the one we imagined." We stared at the letter again. I read the lines over and over, not for detail, we already had that, but for tone. There was no apology, no remorse, just precision and strategy. Preston wasn't seeking redemption. He was seeking control, even in collapse. And yet, the document changed everything. It turned suspicion into certainty. It turned victims into witnesses. It turned our whispers into fire. Rachel's article that evening wasn't a report, it was a reckoning. She published the full confession alongside sidebars, photos of the construction sites, testimonies from grieving families, internal memos, audio clips. The piece went viral within hours. By nightfall, networks were calling it the reckoning of a dynasty. But for me, it felt quieter than that, like laying a heavy stone down after carrying it across a desert. I found Savannah in the backyard around midnight. She was sitting alone on the swing I built her when she was 12, staring at the stars. "He's done," I said. She nodded. You okay? She shrugged. I thought I'd feel more victorious, but I just feel empty. That's grief, I said, even for someone who never earned it. She leaned her head against my shoulder. I hated him, she whispered, but I loved him too. Isn't that sick? No, I said, that's human. We sat there in silence, just the creak of the swing and the cool breath of night. I keep thinking about the wedding, she said suddenly. The fountain, the laughter, how small I felt. I squeezed her hand. You were never small, I said. You just stood in a shadow that didn't belong to you. She looked up at me, eyes brimming. Do you think people will forgive me for not speaking sooner? Sweetheart, I said, brushing her hair back, you stood up when it counted. That's what people remember. And if they don't, then they're not the people who matter. The wind shifted. Leaves danced in the grass. From inside the house, a timer dinged the tea kettle. I stood. You want chamomile? She smiled. Make it 2. As I walked back inside, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not because everything was fixed, but because the truth finally had a name. The first lawsuit landed 3 days after the confession went public. A class action filed by the families of 2 children killed in a school building collapse in Montana 10 years prior. Their names had been footnotes in the original inspection reports, dismissed as freak accidents tied to weather and faulty maintenance. Now, thanks to Preston's confession, they were something else, victims of willful neglect. Rachel texted me the headline, Montgomery Empire faces multi-million-dollar lawsuit from grieving families. Savannah stared at it for a long time. It's starting, she whispered. It won't stop, I said. Not for a long while. But this time, the weight wasn't ours to carry. Connor testified first. He sat before a Senate subcommittee and answered every question with clarity and quiet conviction. He didn't try to defend his father. He didn't hedge his role. He told the truth not just about the documents, but about the silence that made it all possible. Savannah watched it live, her hand in mine, her breath caught in her throat. He's braver than I ever gave him credit for, she said. You both are. 2 days later, she was called in to testify. The courtroom was cold, the walls too white, the chairs too hard, just like every other place designed to hold power at arm's length from accountability. But she didn't flinch. She walked in wearing the same gray dress she'd worn to that last dinner with Preston, a small, subtle defiance. The press didn't miss it. Savannah sat down, cleared her throat, and began. I used to think silence was the same as peace, that if I just didn't stir the waters, I could keep everyone safe. But silence isn't safety. It's complicity. And I won't be part of that anymore. I wept. Not publicly. Not where she could see. But in that moment, I felt every crack in the armor I'd worn for decades, every choice I'd made to keep my head down, to survive, to protect her. And I realized she didn't need protection anymore. She had become her own force. The weeks that followed were a blur of hearings, articles, and court filings. Rachel's reporting earned national awards. David, safe and clear, gave a televised interview that sparked legislation aimed at protecting future whistleblowers. And Preston? He pled guilty. Not out of remorse, but calculation. A plea deal in exchange for reduced sentencing. 12 years in minimum security, with parole in 8. He'll be out by 70, Savannah said the day the sentence was handed down. And he'll be alone, I said. That night, we had dinner together. Just the 3 of us. No reporters, no lawyers, no tension. Just plates of roasted chicken, green beans, and cornbread. Real food, real warmth. Connor raised a glass of cider. To truth, he said. Savannah added, to healing. And I finally lifted mine and whispered, to dignity. The house was quiet after they left. I stood in the hallway, staring at a photo on the wall, Savannah at age 9, arms wrapped around a puppy, cheeks smudged with dirt, eyes fierce even then. You did it, I said softly. Not to her. Not to the photo. To the girl who grew into the woman who stood in a courtroom and burned down a legacy of lies with nothing but her voice. Fall came early that year. The leaves in Casper turned gold in mid-September, and the wind carried a kind of softness that hadn't been there before, like even the air had exhaled. For the first time in what felt like years, life slowed down. Savannah moved back into her old house. Not permanently, just for a while. She needed space, time, somewhere safe to figure out who she was without Preston's shadow draped over her every move. I helped her unpack boxes she hadn't touched in years. Inside one, we found her college notebooks, sketches from her first job, a photograph of her father smiling beside her science fair project. The real father, the one who'd taught her how to build birdhouses, who never missed a parent-teacher conference, who died too soon. She held the photo for a long time. "I forgot how gentle he looked," she said. "Because you've been looking at too many men who weren't," I replied. She smiled, the kind that reaches back into old wounds and stitches them closed. Connor visited most weekends, though they were still figuring things out. Their marriage had been built in a house of mirrors, and now that the mirrors were shattered, they were learning how to see each other clearly for the first time. "It's like starting over," Savannah told me one afternoon as we raked leaves. "Good," I said. "Then take your time. Just make sure you're building on truth this time." I've live friends. Preston's name stopped dominating the news by early October. There were newer scandals, fresher villains. The world moved on. But some wounds don't care about headlines. Savannah still had nightmares sometimes. About the wedding, about the fountain, about the laughter that had cut her down in front of thousands. One night, she woke me up crying. Not from fear, but from rage. "He thought I was nothing." She sobbed into my shoulder. "He made me believe it." One. I held her the way I had when she was 5, sick with fever. "He lied," I whispered, "and now the whole world knows it." The next morning, she began painting again. Small canvases, at first blurry mountains, silhouettes of trees, a crow perched on a broken fence. I didn't ask what they meant. I didn't need to. Healing speaks in color, not words. Rachel visited once before Thanksgiving. We sat on the porch with spiced cider and quiet gratitude. "You know," she said, "this case changed the way we report whistleblowers." "You changed it," I replied. "No," Rachel said, looking at Savannah through the window. "She did." Before she left, she handed Savannah a sealed envelope. Inside, a letter from one of the Montana mothers. The woman's son had died in that school collapse 10 years ago. The letter read, "You gave my boy a voice. You made the world see him again. That's more than justice. That's resurrection." 18. Savannah cried for an hour, not out of sorrow, but because something inside her finally felt clean. Thanksgiving came, and for the first time in years, the table was full not just of food, but of peace. Connor brought the rolls. Savannah made a cranberry tart with too much zest and laughed when we all puckered from the bite. I roasted the turkey myself, basting it every hour, humming to the rhythm of a life that no longer felt like borrowed time. Rachel came too, late in the evening, holding a bottle of wine and wearing the look of someone who'd finally stopped chasing the next story long enough to enjoy the one she helped write. There were no toasts, no speeches, just the soft clatter of forks, the occasional burst of laughter, and the quiet recognition that we had made it out of something heavy and unforgiving and we had done it together. After dinner, Savannah and I sat outside, wrapped in blankets, watching the stars blink through thin clouds. "You ever think about what life would have been like if Dad hadn't died?" she asked. "All the time," I said, "but I try not to stay there too long. The past is a good teacher, but a bad home." She nodded. "I'm not afraid anymore. You shouldn't be. I used to think justice would feel louder," she said, "like a gavel or a headline. But it's quiet. It's eating pie with people who love you, and knowing the truth is out there. That's the only kind that lasts," I said. She leaned her head on my shoulder. "I think I'm going to paint the wedding fountain," she whispered. I raised an eyebrow. "Really?" "Yeah," she said, smiling. "But this time, I'll paint it how it should have been. No fountain, no stage, just us. Real family, you in the front row, wearing something fabulous, and no one laughing." I laughed softly. "You're rewriting it." "And at no far would they have no Haynand." "No," she said. "I'm claiming it. My way." Inside, the kitchen light spilled onto the floor like a warm invitation. Connor was doing the dishes. Rachel was refilling the cider mugs. And for the first time in a long, long while, the house felt like home. Savannah looked up at me one last time. "Do you think people ever really get what they deserve?" I thought about Preston in his quiet prison cell, about the mothers in Montana writing letters of hope, about the cracked ground of Summit Ridge now left untouched. "No," I said, "but sometimes they get what they need." And in that moment, with the stars above and my daughter whole beside me, I knew we had. This story reminds us that true justice doesn't always roar. It often whispers in the quiet acts of courage, truth, and resilience. It teaches us that even when power seems untouchable, integrity can still prevail. Most of all, it shows that healing doesn't come from revenge, but from reclaiming your voice, standing in your truth, and choosing dignity over silence. In the end, the greatest strength lies not in destroying others, but in rebuilding ourselves.